Well, this is where the light was. So what the hell am I doing here? What did you do? And he's still talking to the box like an idiot. Oh my god. Middle of a cemetery, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. Fantastic! Wait a minute. Okay, time to dive into the first film on this long, strange trip. In 1992, a pup named Scooby-Doo went off the air after 3 seasons. There wouldn't be a new Scooby-Doo TV series on the air until 2002. During this 10-year gap, Cartoon Network launched in 1992, then exploded in popularity in 1994, being picked up by a variety of cable providers for the first time and giving audiences a 24-hour source for cartoons. Being a Turner Entertainment subsidiary at the time, the network was created to provide a home for all the animation products Turner had acquired from its purchases of MGM and later Hanna-Barbera Productions. In 1996, Turner merged with Time Warner, and it was after the merger that executives at Time Warner saw that reruns of Scooby-Doo on the network were doing very well, with Scooby's popularity resurging after the downward trend he'd been having in recent years, and they thought it might be time to revive the franchise. They contacted Davis Doy, who was the head of Hanna-Barbera at the time, and suggested making a feature-length direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie. Doy assembled a team of animators, mostly Hanna-Barbera veterans who had been with the studio for a while, and had most recently worked on shows like SWAT Kats and The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. Director Jim Stenstrom had history working on Scooby projects dating back to the new Scooby and Scrappy-Doo show in 1983, and writer Glenn Leopold went back even further to the first season of Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo in 1979. Since the executives at Time Warner were treating the project as a one-off, the team was able to work with complete freedom and with little oversight. There were disagreements, however. Stenstrom suggested that the monsters be real for this outing, while Leopold argued the franchise was at its best when it was a simple solvable mystery with the monster being a bad guy in a mask. Eventually, it was decided to combine both concepts, which would prove to be such a successful idea that it would be repeated for the 3 films following it. The film became a passion project for nearly everyone involved. Legendary Hanna-Barbera character designer and artist Yao Takamoto was still working at Hanna-Barbera and praised the project, even storyboarding a few sequences with Shaggy and Scooby. There were, however, some small problems in casting. Casey Kasem was scheduled to revive his role as Shaggy, but he had recently gone vegan and demanded that Shaggy do the same. The production team found this demand ridiculous, both because eating everything under the sun was one of Shaggy's hallmarks, plus production had already begun on some animation depicting Shaggy eating crawfish. An agreement couldn't be reached, and as such, voice actor Billy West was cast in the role. Don Messick, the voice of Scooby-Doo, had passed away in 1997, and as such, the role of Scooby was given to Scott Innes. While both Daphne and Velma had multiple voice actors over the course of the franchise, most of the actresses involved had either retired or were otherwise unavailable. As a result, Mary Kay Bergman was cast as Daphne, while another veteran voice actress, B.J. Ward, was cast as Velma, based on her performance of the character in the crossover Johnny Bravo episode, Bravo Doobie Doo. Frank Welker, the voice of Fred, was almost recast himself. The producers felt Welker's voice had dropped an octave over the years, despite Welker himself claiming that it hadn't. The team went back to Hanna-Barbera's archive, looked at early Scooby-Doo episodes, and found that Welker was correct. His voice hadn't dropped an octave. It was believed they had made the mistake based on the fact that the reruns airing on Cartoon Network had been sped up slightly to allow more commercial time, thus pitch-shifting Fred's voice up slightly. The movie was completed and released direct-to-home video on September 22, 1998, accompanied by a $50 million marketing campaign that was a huge success. Old-school Scooby fans were delighted to see the reunion of the original gang, something that hadn't happened since certain episodes of the new Scooby-Doo Mysteries in 1984, and the movie also brought in a legion of new Scooby fans as well. But does it live up to its reputation? Let's find out as we look at Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. The movie opens in the typical Scooby fashion: dark and stormy night, creepy old abandoned castle, and a huge monster terrorizing the gang, which leads into Third Eye Blind's rendition of the Scooby-Doo Where Are You theme. As it turns out, this is actually a flashback being told by Daphne about one of the gang's cases. In the present day, the gang have disbanded and apparently been apart from each other for some time. Daphne and Fred now have a tabloid TV show, Velma runs her own bookstore, and Shaggy and Scooby have somehow gotten a job with the Customs Department.
Let the ramming begin!
Yes, I know what Return to Zombie Island did. We will discuss it when we get there. When Daphne expresses how much she misses the gang, Fred makes a couple of phone calls to get the gang back together for the show's new segment, Looking for Actual Ghosts. As it turns out, Velma's not all that enthralled with the retail life, and Shaggy and Scooby, well, their appetites get the better of them as usual.
You ate all the contraband! Excuse me?
Like, untrue, boss. We didn't eat it all. There's still a couple of gorgonzolas left. Help yourself.
You're a couple of gorgonzolas! You're fired!
The gang reunites on Daphne's birthday and heads for New Orleans, where, unfortunately, they find themselves back in the same old rut. While the other song that appears in this film gets a lot of credit and love, I think this one, The Ghost Is Here, is just as good. It's catchy, it sums up the life of the gang and Daphne's growing frustration with finding more creeps in masks rather than real supernatural creatures. It's also performed by Sky Cycle, and I think it needs a lot more recognition than it gets. Speaking of Daphne, when she laments out loud that there has to be one real haunted house in Louisiana, she gets an unexpected response.
What I want is a house that's really haunted. I mean, there must be one somewhere in Louisiana.
There is. I work in it. Sorry, I couldn't help it over here.
This is Lena Dupree, voiced by Tara Strong, chief at a local plantation house on nearby Moonscar Island. She claims the island is haunted by pirate Morgan Moonscar. Additionally, Velma's research reveals a history of disappearances on the island over the years. The gang decide to investigate and follow her to the ferry to the island, meeting ferryman Jacques, voiced by Jim Cummings, and swamp-dwelling hermit Snakebite Scruggs, voiced by Mark Hamill. On the boat, Lena expresses some discomfort with Scooby coming to the island.
No, it's just that my employer, Ms. Lenoir, she keeps cats.
Arriving at the house, which was a former pepper plantation, the gang meets the house's owner, Simone Lenoir, played by Adrienne Barbeau. She is also not enamored with Scooby when he terrorizes the army of cats that live there and destroys the hard work of Bo, the gardener, voiced by Cam Clark. Despite this not great first impression, Simone agrees to let the gang tour the house and to keep Scooby occupied, lets him and Shaggy raid the kitchen. After the two of them cause a commotion by overdosing on hot peppers, they have their first supernatural encounter on the island.
Tell you what, like, we'll split this big one. That'll warm us up.
When Daphne videotapes her first segment, a ghostly wind passes through, adding another word to the message, and Velma suddenly starts levitating. When they review the footage, they spot what appears to be the ghost of Morgan Moonscar. Simone is surprised the gang doesn't want to leave, with the obvious exceptions, but Daphne's excited about there being a real ghost, Velma's intrigued by the mystery, and Fred is convinced it's another hoax. Which is an interesting thing in these movies, because when they began, Fred was the resident skeptic, but as time has gone on, that role has moved to Velma. Not exactly for the better in some of the later films, but again, we'll talk about that when we get there. Velma takes another look at the wall and makes a discovery.
M.A. What are you doing to my kitchen? Jinkies. Guess I got carried away.
Simone explains that parts of the house are old and parts of Moonscar's ship were probably used in its construction. There are also rumors that Moonscar had buried treasure somewhere on the island.
Treasure?
Aha! I knew it! It's some guy disguised as a pirate ghost trying to scare everyone off the island!
You can just hear Daphne screaming, "Shut up, Fred." Shaggy and Scooby retreat outside with more food, where Scooby chases the cats again, which results in another encounter with Snakebite and his hunting pig Mojo, who chases Scooby and Shaggy into a pit out in the middle of the woods, where things escalate rapidly. They run into Bo while making their escape, and when the rest of the gang show up, Shaggy and Scooby show them the hole, but there's nothing there. Velma's suspicious of Bo, especially with the size of the hole, and when Fred says they should get going, Simone offers to let them stay the night. Now, throughout this movie, we have an ongoing jealousy subplot with Fred and Daphne getting annoyed with each other for being attracted to Lena and Bo, respectively. It's not very well presented and ultimately serves to go nowhere, although we're going to see more of Fred and Daphne's on-again, off-again romance throughout the rest of these movies. Meanwhile, in their room, Shaggy and Scooby have another ghost encounter.
Who's that? Well, I don't know. Get away!
Investigating the appearance, Velma discovers the mirror in the room belonged to a colonel in the Confederate Army. Simone confirms the Confederate Army kept barracks on the island. At dinner, Scooby and Shaggy are exiled outside. Meanwhile, Daphne gets annoyed at Fred and Velma, theorizing about what's really going on.
Really, guys? For once, can't you accept that maybe there are some mysteries that have no rational explanation?
Out in the swamp, things start to get a little more dead. The zombies are easily one of the best parts of this movie. They're genuinely frightening and menacing, which, considering this is 2D animation, is saying something. I was just wrapping up college when this movie came out, but I can only imagine the legions of kids who got their first real introduction to horror through this movie. Bo runs into Shaggy and Scooby and heads back to the house when they run off. When the rest of the gang hear Shaggy and Scooby screaming their heads off, they head into the bayou with Bo to find them.
Why do you keep treating me like I'm a suspect?
Because you are.
Velma's not taking any of your crap, Bo. After an effectively creepy moment when Bo stops Velma from wandering into quicksand, Daphne and Fred find the mystery machine, followed quickly by Shaggy and Scooby, and they all get their wake-up call that this time the monsters are real.
And I suppose they're all animatronic, too!
Well, it is a possibility, Daph.
You're not a skeptic, Fred. You're in denial.
Fred and Daphne hear Lena screaming back at the house and race back. Unfortunately, they lose the camera in the quicksand and all the proof they have that the zombies are real. Cue the moment everyone loves from this movie.
'Cause it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night.
In their panic, Shaggy and Scooby crash into an underground cavern and discover an altar with crude dolls of Fred, Daphne, and Velma, which are, of course, voodoo dolls.
Hey, this one looks like Daphne. Hey!
Sorry, Fred.
Ow! Hey!
It's not my fault. Something's controlling me.
I can't.
Jinkies. Sorry.
Shaggy and Scooby are chased out of the cavern by bats, dropping the dolls in the process. Lena screams again, and the others head back to the mansion, only finding the power out and the house empty. Fred finds a secret passage in the staircase, along with Lena, who explains what happened.
We ran back to the house, and Miss Lenoir opened the secret passageway. She said it was built during the Civil War to hide from Union soldiers, but the zombies came after us. They grabbed Miss Lenoir and dragged her away.
They head down the tunnel, and Velma spots some footprints leading down one of them. They emerge in another cave, where it looks like voodoo rituals are performed, where Velma reveals what she knows.
She wasn't dragged. She walked down that tunnel.
Very clever, Velma, but it's too late.
And that's only the beginning.
I've been getting away with it for 200 years.
This is a really effective twist. It still follows the usual Scooby formula that usually the first people the gang meets is behind the crime, but the twist that we're dealing with an entirely different supernatural menace is a good one. Simone and Lena tie the dolls up, immobilizing the four, and explain they didn't bother with dolls of Shaggy and Scooby since they're cowards. Speaking of, the boys find the fairy and get an unpleasant surprise.
I am happy to see y'all.
Back at the temple, for want of a better word, Simone explains that she and Lena were part of a group of settlers who were attacked by Moonscar and his crew, driving most of them into the bayou where they were either drowned or were eaten by the gators. Since the colony worshipped a cat god, and no, that kind of thing actually wasn't unusual in the late 1700s, Simone and Lena prayed for help in destroying the pirates. As a result, they became both immortal and transformed into cat creatures, killing the crew and draining their life force to prolong their own lives. Needing a ferryman, Jacques was recruited later. Out in the swamp, Jacques finally catches Shaggy and Scooby, but is overwhelmed by the zombies, allowing them to escape. They crash into the cave and knock over Simone and Lena before they can drain the others. This does not make either of the two women happy. The zombies show up, and pretty much the two groups run rampant, causing a big enough distraction for Velma to untie her doll and free herself and the others. Lena and Simone catch Shaggy and Scooby and begin to drain them, but Velma and Daphne use their own voodoo against them. Despite all this, Lena, Simone, and Jacques keep coming until... With the cat creatures dead, the zombies can finally move on. Daphne laments all the proof they have that something authentically supernatural happened is at the bottom of a quicksand bog, and Velma points out it's unlikely the police will believe the story either.
I'm Detective Bone Neville. Been working undercover, investigating the island disappearances.
And so the gang bids farewell to Moonscar Island, and Scooby has a celebratory sandwich.
Rocky. Rats. Ripes.
Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island was a massive success in the home video market, with most critics praising the animation and story. But believe it or not, online, people lost their minds about the very idea that the gang would wind up facing real monsters, despite events in later series in the early 80s. That's a far cry from what people have to say about this movie today, which just goes to show you that rabid online fans really have no idea what they actually want. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island has since taken its rightful place as a direct-to-video classic, and the movie has never gone out of print in the 21 years since its release, allowing plenty of kids and adults to experience one of the best Scooby-Doo adventures ever made. If you've never seen it before, what are you waiting for? Check this movie out for yourself and see what everyone's been making a buzz about. And we'll see how the addition of real monsters continued to enhance the franchise when we look at the next of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Ugh, God. Ugh. Well, this is gonna be a riot, I can already tell. And I think I know exactly what to do with you. Alright, on to the next.
Here come those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them away.